Welcome to the Consulting Leaders Podcast, where we talk about the business of consulting. Whether you're looking to grow your practice or learn from the stories of leaders in consulting, you're in the right place. I'm your host, Guillaume Jouvencel, ex-PwC and co-founder of GHA Marketing. Join me as I interview the best consultants in their niche. Let's get on with the show. Florian, it's not always that I have the immense honor of welcoming another fellow French businessman on this show. So welcome to Consulting Leaders.
Guillaume, nice to be here.
It's nice to have you. So tell me the journeyman. How does one get into subscription and product as a service for manufacturers? And how did you turn this into management consulting as your own firm?
Well, the journey started more or less 7-8 years ago. I was a student consultant for CHEP, the logistics company that do the blue pallets. And this was my first exposure to subscription models. And I was really fascinated by those models and decided to write my thesis about subscription, or more specifically, product as a service models. And I researched 9 different companies: Rolls-Royce, Michelin, Atlas Copco, Hilti. They were all part of it. And what was interesting is all those companies moved towards subscription models. But the most interesting thing is there were patterns related to the financing structure, the sales enablement, the IT infrastructure, the contracts, etc. And so this gave me this idea to be willing to specialize in subscription models for physical products. And I finished university and started as a freelance consultant and found my first client in Germany, in Munich. So I moved there in 2019. And I built a subscription model for power tools back then. And essentially, it was really building it from scratch. So pure entrepreneurship, from an idea to a concept to the first revenues being generated. So this was very interesting. But then the client, they're part of a group, and they asked me, okay, well, now please document what you have done. And this, to me, this was annoying. It was fun building it, right? But I needed to document it for them. And this documenting forced me to structure what was actually being done and to put this into, let's say, categories. And so this is where the idea came. Well, this is actually repeatable, right? So basically you have a service that you transform into a product. And this was the launch of P2S, products to services or products to subscriptions. And fast forward 6.5 years, we've analyzed more than 300 subscription cases. We've worked with more than 35 different clients on subscription business model transformations. And the journey has been very, very fun.
I like that. I think we actually finished our studies quite at the same timing. Interesting, Florian. More to discuss around that. What's the problem that you solve now? For what benefit? What outcome?
Well, the companies that we work with or that we speak with at the beginning, they say subscriptions are cool. We want a Netflix model. We want a Spotify model in our business. Our competitors are doing subscriptions, or we need recurring revenue. But essentially, the real drivers behind that are, on one side, product commoditization. So there's an erosion on price. The other big thing is volatility. So most companies selling products in a non-subscription way, they are having the consequences of this project business where you have very, very volatile sales. Then there's another trend, which is next generation leaders are having a mindset of subscriptions. They grew up or they grew into subscriptions. They've been using subscriptions for quite some time, and they're not so much in the ownership type of model. So those are a bit the drivers of why companies want to move towards subscription model, I would say.
Why is that? So I understand there is the cultural aspect, but talk to me about the business model of it. Why do you think product to service or product as a service could be a better option than, hey, here is my product and here is my product again, or we wait 2 years and here is my product again? Like, why product as a service? Can you develop on that?
Well, the traditional transactional business model where you sell something, You hope that the customer doesn't call you because they have any problems with it, and then they only call you back whenever they want to purchase a new product. This, in especially the Western world, is going to be very hard to achieve. Why? Because products are always going to be more expensive than lower cost competitors, so you cannot compete on price anymore, and you can less and less compete on the technical aspects of a product. Which brings you to, well, what can you compete on? You can compete on two things, which is software and services, right? You can have better services, so closer to support, better support with your customer, and then you can have better software. And the software is basically the one that is going to dictate your services, I'm going to say. So if you collect a lot of data about your equipment out there, then you can have smarter decisions be taken on the services side. And essentially, what is product as a service is the bundling of hardware, software, and services together into one package, but to decrease the importance of the physical product, of the hardware, and to increase the importance of the services and the software. And by changing this dynamic, by bundling this together and not selling the physical product, but selling the outcome, the usage, this makes product as a service work. And this brings me to another point, which is the pricing model behind it. Whenever you buy something, you're probably not interested in the physical product itself. You're interested in what this product, this solution procures as a result to you. So certain success factors. If we take the example of Rolls-Royce, they're selling turbines. Well, the turbines itself are not interesting to the airlines, right? What's interesting to the airlines is flying passengers from point A to point B. And so the customer success metric is transportation from point A to point B. And so Rolls-Royce, what they did is they translated this success metric from the customers into their own pricing mechanism. And their pricing mechanism, instead of doing we sell you turbines, was we sell you flying hours. So they bundle the turbine, the services, the software together into one solution. And then they have a recurring long-term contract where they don't sell the machine, but they sell flying hours. And so this logic of not selling the product, but selling the outcome, the usage, the performance, this is in essence what product as a service and subscription models for physical products are all about.
Two things I like about this. First one is, this is focused on the customer benefit. Like, what's the benefit of it for the end customer? And the other thing is, one of the things you started with actually, which is stop competing on price. And I think that's something that could be applied to any business today in the Western world, especially for B2B coaches and consultants. That's always going to be cheaper. So finding a way to compete on the things that where you can actually make a difference is probably where you want to go. And I like the example of like product as a service here. Who is it that you help implement such a strategy, Florian? What company, what industry, what size, I don't know, are you typically looking at when it comes to helping them transform their product into a product as a service?
Well, if you look around you, everything is becoming subscription-based, right? Which doesn't make our job easier because we all know that focus and niche is important. So at P2S, we decided that we want to focus on physical products mostly. And so we work with companies that are selling hardware along with software as well. So those are software-enabled products, so machines, devices in general, mostly in the B2B industry. And we focus on business model transformation. What this means is that it needs to be a certain size of a company. We set this at least 100 employees because there needs to be certain complexity because you want to transform something, right? So we don't work with startups. We work with established companies that have been existing for decades usually, and that want to reinvent themselves and go away from this selling towards this subscription. So I mentioned software enabled. I mentioned the size in terms of employees. Another point which is important is service. The company needs to control or offer the service themselves. So the service on their own products. This is important. And then the fourth and last point is it's a premium positioning. You can only offer a subscription model to your customers if you are seen as a premium player. What this means, you're comparably expensive towards your peers, towards your competitors. Those are a few of the conditions. Those are four. There's a few more, but of why companies are a good fit for subscriptions, and then also a good fit for us at P2S to help them transform this.
Who makes the decision of, the reason I'm asking this, let me put the context on this question. It is it's a complete change in business model at the end of the day. It's like, hey, the way you've been selling it so far is not necessarily wrong, but not fitted anymore. Here's how we're going to do it instead. But it's not just, changing how you build a product. It's probably rethinking the whole sales process, the whole logistics of it, the whole marketing of it. So who do you need to get into a room with your company to say, hey guys, this is something that you might want to explore. And by the way, here is how we can help. Who's your ICP?
Very good question, Guillaume. The tough part or the fun part at the same time is that
go together.
It's the big decision makers, which are usually the CEOs, the shareholders, the CFOs, that actually sign it off, because it's a huge strategic topic, as you've just mentioned. All those building blocks, pricing, IT, financing, legal, product, digital, service, they're all going to be involved, right? It's not just a pricing tweak, it's a complete business model transformation. So the entire company, the entire board of the company needs to be aligned that this is something they want to explore and implement. So essentially, it's all the big decision makers within a company, but then there's no real pattern of who is the initiator. It can be the VP of product, it can be the CFO, it can be a marketing manager, it can be the CTO, it can be the CEO. So there's no real pattern there of where the idea initially comes from. But what is true is they all need to be convinced and jump into the boat together.
What has worked for you to get the attention of those people? What marketing channel do you use to make people? I mean, it's not only solution aware, it's also problem aware. It's also educating them, right, on what's out there, the possibility of like rethinking their whole model. So what has worked for you, Florian, to build the marketing mix that gets the right people through the door?
I think this is something that has evolved over time. Back in 2019, I got into the car, drove to trade fairs in Germany with my first investment, which were 60 euros of business cards, and kind of running around those halls until the feet hurt and trying to speak to people. But this was, let's say, the first step. But then you want to go in more of a educational and prescriptive way. So this was the very beginning. Now what is working much better is creating content, creating awareness about subscription model, product as a service model, case studies, what works, what doesn't work. But the things I like the most is referrals in the end. And this is, to me, the most gratifying thing. If we work with a certain company and there's always a project team, those people within that team, well, after some years, they change jobs as well and they change companies. And this has happened multiple times where those people change jobs, and whenever they arrive in their new company, they reintroduce this idea of subscription models and they reintroduce us, and kind of this warm introduction from themselves, because they were convinced that subscription models is the good way forward and that our accompaniment was useful. These are the most gratifying things, and the things that are growing as well. But to your point also, podcast, we launched a podcast ourselves, which is called the Products to Services Podcast, where we interview subscription leaders, so basically companies that have developed or scaled a subscription models themselves, which we interview. It's a long format, so it's quite long interview. So if you're staying until the end, and you're probably really, really interested in those, in those models. But so the podcast is something that has been working for us as well. But I would say it's really the combination of all those different medias that you have to use nowadays.
I mean, in B2B coaching and consulting, I don't think there is such a thing as like one single channel. Like you're gonna have touch points through different ones. You're gonna stay top of mind in certain people, but then of course you're gonna have the flagships who are going to bring the most attention and that get people down the funnel. So the podcast choice is an interesting one. Obviously, that's preaching to the choir here. Why did you decide to go after podcast and not, I don't know, YouTube or like blogs or ads? Why did you go for podcast specifically?
I think nowadays with AI being everywhere, we lose the human touch point, and all those blog posts which are very long, which you can create within 30 seconds. Who is actually going to read them? This is one thing. It's perhaps good for the search engines and for kind of being referenced. This is great. But if you really want to go into a topic, if you're really interested, I believe that people are going to take time to actually listen to people speak, to have human voices. And so to us at P2S, we felt this is a good way to humanize education again, especially in the last, let's say, 2 years where AI has been so present. But again, AI is great and we use AI as well. But I think it's important also to have this real human aspect and kind of, I am a real human being, I move, it's not AI here, right?
I mean, until we can create very realistic AI avatars of you, Florian, and it's just like, maybe I'm an AI speaking right now. So I don't do this often, but since you use this format, for the people listening to us, I think this is such a smart choice. What we believe is that in 2026, the consulting and the coaching firms who are going to win are the ones who are, of course, able to showcase thought leadership expertise, subject matter expertise, right? Who are trusted, but most importantly, who are authentic, who we can see under the hood, like, hey, what's happening with this company, with a founder story as well. And when there is conversations happening, because when you think about it, B2B business comes from conversations. As much as we like to automate everything and scale everything and put AI everywhere, the conversation is what moves the needle. And sometimes, I suspect, especially in your case, Florian, it takes multiple conversations with the right people at the right time. This is what podcast allows to do. So, in my opinion, very smart choice. Spoiler though, I'm heavily biased.
So am I.
Talk to me about how you move from those initial conversations with the podcast, but also the referrals, right? Like your whole marketing mix. How do you go from there to a letter of engagement, an SOW? Like, what does the sales motion look like at your company, Florian?
Well, the first step where, let's say, we speak with a certain prospect, with a certain company, is going to be an introductory call that we're going to do. Usually it takes a good hour, where we get to know their business. We show them some cases of what we've worked on, what their peers are working on, and some numbers to basically, I mean, our big IP is our database. As I said, we've analyzed more than 300 companies doing subscriptions, and there are certain trends for each industry that are interesting to those companies. So this is step number one. At the end of that call, and sometimes there is a second or third call necessary as well, but at the end, we suggest them to have a first workshop, and this is the first paying step, where we're going to spend time with them and their teams, the pluridisciplinary teams, so different departments being involved. And this is where we go into a big brainstorming session and look at what is possible in terms of subscription models within their specific company. So we analyze different verticals, do a maturity assessment, et cetera, et cetera. And so this is really an inspirational and brainstorming design type of session. At the end of that, we decide, okay, is this a fit? Yes or no? If yes, how? and we look at different let's say scopes of how the different subscription models could look like, and then start actually our complete engagement. So this is where we take a complete engagement with our clients, where we say, okay, we choose 1 or 2 verticals, and we're going to transform them from a transactional sales into a subscription business model. And this whole journey can last, so the complete project lasts anywhere between 6 to 18 or 24 months. So it's a quite wide spread. But then between the first call and then, let's say, even the first workshop, well, sometimes it's 2 weeks, but sometimes it can take 2 years as well. So there's no real rule there, unfortunately.
We wish. I like the co-creation throughout the sales process. For me, that's the right way to do consulting anyways. It's like back to that trust, authority, subject matter expertise that we were touching upon earlier. You want to be able to showcase that live with the person and with the stakeholders, and start making them taste the value of your services and the value of your support. So that does make a lot of sense to me. And that's going to be an interesting one for you, Florian, I think. I mean, for me, from you. You help transform product into a product as a service. Once this is done, then what? How do you retain? How do you farm? How do you, keep on providing value to the clients, whilst, of course, keep on charging them? Like, at the end of the day, a consulting practice really grows only when they are able to retain clients. What's your subscription model?
Well, at P2S, more than half of the team are entrepreneurs. They have developed their own ventures in the past. They have developed subscription models within their own companies. So we really think as entrepreneurs. And our model essentially is taking risk in the projects that we do. Mm-hmm. When I mean taking risk is we are big fans of performance bonuses. So we work on something, and then if it works, there is a over the years, compensation for this, which makes it way more of a co-venturing, co-entrepreneurship type of model rather than selling hours or days, which, by the way, we never do. So this is the first point of, I'm going to say, recurring business. But then the other point of recurring business is, as I mentioned before, we usually choose 1 or 2 verticals where in the short term, the lowest hanging fruit, this is where it makes the most sense to develop a subscription model. But as we all know, subscription models can be developed for a variety of different verticals. And so essentially, if we do a good job, then, well, quite naturally, the company is going to, the client is going to ask us to duplicate this, let's say, to other business verticals. And then the third point, this is on the client side, but then as I mentioned earlier, behind every client, it's first and foremost humans, right? And if humans change job, well, they, as I said, can be repeated business as well, because they might introduce the topic of subscriptions in their new company.
Amen to that. Florian André, ladies and gentlemen. Florian, if people want to find out more about you, see what you do, where should they go?
Well, LinkedIn, I would say, Florian André on LinkedIn, or right away on our website, p2sconsulting.com, or of course on the podcast, which can be found on Spotify, on Apple Podcast, or on YouTube, which is called the Product to Services podcast.
We'll put all the links in the description. I can say one thing for sure, Florian, is that you've gained at least 1 new connection on LinkedIn out of this interview. Me, I just added you. Florian, thank you so much for coming on Consulting Leaders.
Guillaume, merci beaucoup for the conversation.
Merci à toi. Thanks for joining us on this episode of the Consulting Leaders podcast. We hope you learned valuable lessons on how to grow your practice and take your business to the next level. Make sure to subscribe and leave us a review wherever you're listening to this show so you never miss an episode. To apply and be a guest on the show, click the link in the description. See you next time.